chairman for the committee.
Don't really have one.
Who calls the committee to order?
I guess I do. Greg, we have here Tinker Dawson, John Cotwitz, Heather Russell, Mayor Chris Cox, Jan Hollis, and Vicki Simmons.
Okay.
And so we're gonna call the meeting to order, and let's kind of get the first thing here. We got one of the discussions we had at one of the last meetings was someone asked if cemetery board members could do work out in the cemetery, and I said we have to check with our insurance, and it looks like our workman's comp will cover that such thing for volunteers. And if we need to rent a tractor or a bucket, we'll have to try to do a little bit more insurance work on our end for that. But I think, as I understand, the cost for that would be like maybe 15, 20, 30, 50 bucks, something like that. So I don't know how we would do that during the COVA, but we are able to do some cemetery work out there, dirt work, monument work, if we can do those things. So that kind of answers that issue that we had the last time, I think, that we met.
Okay, good.
Anybody else got any questions on that? Okay, so then we're going to move right along over to discussing the unidentified, grave spaces in the cemetery, and Heather's got a lot of information on that, and so does the mayor. So I'm going to turn it over to them.
So I can start. Well, I think most of you are aware that we had a situation recently where
Greg, can you hear her?
Not well, but
I can move up. I just
You can move a little closer.
okay. I'll stay right here.
Hopefully they'll help you.
Okay. So we had a situation recently in the cemetery where we were not sure where if we could bury someone in this block 3, because on our cemetery map it does say no stone or unknown, and in that section specifically. So we've done a lot of research on that to try to see if we can rectify that situation. What we found is that our records, like our GIS database, I think it was ArcGIS originally, and then it got transferred over to what our Midland GIS is. But everything in the cemetery has been mapped out. I believe that from my conversations with different people that Kathy Colvin did a lot of legwork to get all of that information that's in that database up to date. So far as to, I had never heard it before this situation came up, called the black section of the cemetery. I didn't know that. I've lived here for 16 years, and working with Kathy, I never heard her refer to it that way. So if it has been called that, then it was news to me, and news to Phyllis as well.
I lived here my whole life and had never heard it, that there was a
And
black
I've been
section.
40 years and have never heard it until now.
I have.
No.
But,
Yeah.
so,
I haven't heard of it.
You had?
I've heard it called that, yeah, I can't.
okay.
I have.
So, whenever we were looking and doing our research, we found a lot of different things. We found out a lot of history that we didn't know, history about the flood from, I think Vicki said was 1999. But I do believe that what we have, according to all the records that we have and all the second, we've gone through, we've double checked everything. We believe everything that we have as far as a record, even everything that they had from the Historical Society, is on our database. So that leaves the question, what do we do from here? If we know that there are probably unmarked graves or possibly just disturbed ground, what do we do from here? So I reached out to the city manager's listserv because I figured this is probably not a Centralia alone problem, and I found out that's correct. There are several cities. I was contacted by several city managers who had their own instances of older parts of the cemetery being, just a lack of records. I mean, if you think about it, we were founded in the 1800s.
I think
so-
that, I think when we went out to the cemetery to look at the plots in the old section, we had quit selling in the old part of the section, the cemetery, in 2001, due to whatever reason, because of uncertainty. The last thing you wanna do is have someone burying a loved one, and not be able to bury that one and find someone already existing there. So we quit selling at that point. He gave quite an ortation. Our grave digger, the gentleman was very sharp. Whalen, is that his name?
Scott
Last name,
Whalen.
Scott Whalen. And he explained that this was a potter's field, and he said that's what they refer to in the oldest parts of cemeteries, because it's like planting people there because of all varieties. You don't know what's going to be there, but he said because we had a rail, which makes sense, and I thought about that. We had a lot of transient traffic through Centralia back in the day compared to even other cities, right? Because we had a rail depot. So you had that combined with the fact that back in the day, people's life expectancies were shorter. You might have someone that was carrying a child, goes into labor here in Centralia along a wagon trail or whatever, staying at the inn, and she has complications, she passes away, loses a child, and you have no idea. And so we had a lot of people, and this is not different than any place that has an old cemetery, right? New cities don't have this problem because they kept the ledger from the beginning, and it's been automated and electronic.
Yeah.
So what he said to me was that is a problem that everybody has. And the problems that exist with that is to identify and define, you might find a belt buckle or whatever, but because they were wooden boxes that they were put in, right, basically, as a coffin, those are rotted, they've gone away, so forth like that. So, this is a problem that exists a lot of places, and so she was getting that feedback too from a lot of places. But I kind of want to throw in his orientation on what he's seen and where he's seen it. And he said, you guys do a better job than most any place I bury. Now, we didn't take, just for edification, because I did not know this, I think it's close to this, that the cemetery dates back to 1858, maybe 52. And we took it over in the early 1960s.
1960s is what I remember.
1962 or somewhere in there is when we took it over, so it was private till then, is what I was, and he was explaining this to me.
It's interesting.
And so we had, what we got was these books that were falling apart when we were looking through them. So we had, from private ownership or private management of the books and the ledgers and the journals of who was buried there, we got handed a bunch of books and so forth when we took it over. And then that's when we went back to Kathy having to do that legwork and trying to get that transferred to the electronic system, right? So just want to go back. There's a lot of this I had no idea. I didn't know that we took it over in '62 and we were private to the city owned it, and had responsibility for the record keeping and from this day forward, that kind of thing. So the marriage with us started sometimes early '60s, and so for 100 years, let's say, prior to that, there was people that were out there that we don't know who they are. Period. I mean, so that's a fact. Then there was problems with the headstones, where they tried to fix an area that was low in water about 2000 is what Ms. Simmons was telling me, and the fact is, those just because there's a headstone there doesn't mean that's where the grave is, so that got jacked up a lot. So we have those problems. So I just kind of want to bring everybody up to speed of what I've learned through this process with Mr. Kelly wanting to bury his sister who passed away, unfortunately. So just to give you that edification, because I learned a lot through that whole process. So
some of the other things that I learned, in the city of Fulton, they had 2 graves that they needed to relocate because they were in an industrial area. And they were told before they were exhumed that you may find a belt buckle or a boot, but whenever they went, there was nothing left. So there are some claims out there that we should be trying to dig up these graves and trying to do DNA testing. But I just need that to be out there, that it's very possible that there's nothing left to do DNA testing on. There's not going to be a bone or a bone fragment. And, it would not be very similar to what you would see in CSI. I mean, we're not going to be these crime scene and detectives, I don't think we're gonna find what, you know, what you,
Let's
what you think
say,
we might find, but I just wanted to throw that out there, that that's what I've been told.
let me ask this question too, because this all goes into the thinking of what can we do moving forward, right? Because that's something we want to come away from the committee, let you guys have the opportunity to take on. And if there's a way for us to improve anything in the city, let alone resting sites of deceased, we want to do that. There's no question in my mind, right? But the problem I have is, to what length do you go to say that there's, I understand if we can validate there's someone there, that DNA is not of any value to you, because unless, the only database I know you can run is a criminal database, that they have existing potential DNA out there, you know? And so, I don't know how you would know who that was unless, it could be
Unless you had
anybody.
somebody to compare
It
it
could be any
to.
family DNA, I don't know.
So,
So that's challenging, so just bringing that up too, because that's one of the things I scratch my head and I fight against in my mind, how do we do that, you know, so, go ahead.
no, you're fine. I did get some helpful feedback from some of the cities and some of the city managers that have dealt with this. I've got some contact information. I did try to make a phone call last week or the week before to somebody in Washington, Missouri, that does kind of historical things with cemeteries like this. A lot of it's volunteer, and that's where we get to the point with the city, is the city, we just had to let go people. We had to do a reduction in force because we are not sure what our financial situation is going to be. We don't have the money to spend $1,500 to exhume grave sites. One of the aldermen said, well, maybe if we find out that somebody is buried there, we could budget in 1 or 2 small headstones a year just to say that somebody is buried there. But we don't know whose name to put on that. We don't know. There have been some requests that we put up a monument for all, in that letter that is in your packet, for all the black and brown people. But in all reality, we don't know that.
They're not all black and
No, you're
brown that are there.
You're
Yeah.
gonna have Indians, you may have Asian
Right.
people that were here, you may have Confederate or otherwise soldiers out
Sure.
there. I mean, it's a potter's field, that's why I like to get back to, that's why I mentioned that,
Yeah.
okay? I mean,
And the other big thing is, I feel that, from the research that we've done and talking to the Historical Society and things like that, that big section that says unknown could potentially date back to the Civil War. And, I don't know if that's a fact, but that's what I've been told that it could. So I think we run into a lot of things there, but that doesn't mean we don't have, that we shouldn't do something. That just means that those are things that we could think about. So one thing, I got some very interesting information back, and I'll pass this around for all of you, from the city of Rolla. They had a very similar situation. They were very fortunate. They were able to partner with Missouri S&T, and they did this geophysical survey. It's got a lot of good information in there. You can see I printed this out in color because I thought it was very helpful to see on these pages what they've identified. They do like the ground penetrating
Mapping.
sonar and things like that. It didn't cost them a dime because they were able to partner with the college. If that's something that we could do, if that's something we could pursue, that would be great. But I don't know. I mean, that's just gonna take a lot of research and discussion, really on the cemetery advisory committees.
Well, speaking on the section over there are, honestly, there are hardly anybody left that actually goes over there, relatives, because a lot of people are gone, because I've been the one for the last 2 or 3 years going out, putting flowers on the graves out there, because there's nobody that comes, there's no relatives, there's no, because most of those, I would say, in that section, at least 80 to 90% have no one
well,
that
they're not
comes.
left. It's-
So I don't even know if we could even do a DNA, because I don't even know if there's anybody left in their families. So that's one of the problems you're gonna have out there, because there's nobody, there's probably, I think the Tuckers come out there, I go out there, and Jamie Inyard goes out there, but for the most part, there's no one that comes out.
Are you hearing okay, Greg?
Yeah, I'm hearing fine.
Okay.
There's no one that goes out there, so I don't, you know.
We will, we'll make sure you get that back.
Don't know how you would say, okay, do I know any relatives that live there when there's no one that can tell you? Because I mean, other than me and Jamie, I mean, we're about the only ones that could even begin to tell you, we don't know.
I think at the time that it needed to be done, and it sounds like it was,
10 to 15 years ago, I'd say, is when Kathy was doing all
when
that.
Kathy did that, you know, when we were gonna move to the, what do you call it, GIS,
GIS.
GIS,
Yeah,
system.
Mhm.
And she went out and did a lot of footwork, and that came from her husband, talking about
Mhm.
that and remembered it, and saying, she went out to black, white families both, and spent a lot of time going, trying to find the root family origin and figure that out.
To get more information.
And thank goodness she did, because what, she probably found information that we would never find today now.
Right.
Because those people would not be here maybe to give us that information, so. We did do that, that's referred to in a letter that we got, or an email, that we might wanna do
You all
that.
have a copy of that letter. I think it was emailed out to you, from Justin Kelly and Dr. Jackie Sample, who is running for, she's a candidate for, what was it?
Representative?
Candidate for Missouri House District number 44.
Right, mhm.
There were some things in the letter that we did want to address. Part of it said that the city did not charge the family for the service, and that's not true. They were charged for one grave opening, just as anybody else would be. They weren't charged for multiple grave openings. We did go out and identify 3 different potential spots, plots that for burial, and they were able to bury their sister in the first one, right next to her brother, which was fortunate. And then we did, because we felt that this was kind of a lot of undue stress, we charged them the same price that we charged for their brother's, the brother's grave, which was half price of what we charge now, so.
Which is 300, which we charge them 50.
150.
Right.
So that part of this letter was not accurate, so I wanted to point that out.
So they charge 150.
150
One for
instead of
the
300.
burial plot, and then the regular opening fee, and, you know, the burial opening closing fee was the same. And, part of the issue was that we quit selling in that part of the territory in 2001, like I say. And, there was, his aunt came up, who I've known forever, Darcy Nichols Kelly, who was married to John. She was going to, I talked to her a few minutes, and correct me if I'm wrong, she came up because she had some burial plots in that section, and she was going to give one to the niece, it would be a niece, I believe, at that point, right? Was going to give one to the niece that day, and that's what they were, so her and I talked a few minutes, I left, and then got an email from an alderman about a Facebook post, I don't know, at 6:30 that night. So that being said, we went to work with Mr. Kelly at that point the next morning, really, because he had posted on Facebook a pretty glaring review of unhappiness with the city. The frustrating thing was, to me, she wasn't involved, or nor was I involved at that point, to try to see if there was something we could come up with more than what we've been doing since 2001. And Mrs. Brown doing her job of what, you know, we're supposed to do. We can put 5 cremations on top of a burial site of someone buried, or in that section, that's always been the thing since 2001, you can do 5 cremations, or you can do a cremation, or you'd have to go to an open part of the cemetery. So the next morning, we were able to get together and start dialogue with one another. Mr. Kelly and I and Heather had already went to work on cross-referencing. We spent a lot of time, a lot of effort, had three women, I think, working on it full-time that morning, as well as the Historical Society was helping us as well, to get to a point that I could, Vicki was helping, to try to get to a point to do something that we haven't done since 2001. So, and that's give some options. And then when we talked, Justin Kelly and I talked that morning, he posted on Facebook that we were working together to try to come to a resolution, which I asked him to do, and he was more than glad to do that. And we were able to work through it. We were able to work through and do something that we hadn't offered to do for anybody else. I mean, basically since 2001, and try to get some resolution. And we were able to pick 3 options. We told him that, you know, if option 1 is not good, we're not going to charge you for that. It'll just be the one burial, opening and closing in one lot. And naturally, we hoped for the best, and we did get the best out of the thing, which we were able to bury right next to the brother that passed away at the age of, I think, about 8. So anyway, that being said, that's kind of a little background of how that all kind of rolled out and went a little bit, that day, and then we were able to get resolution, get that done, so we had picked 3 spots.
So I think what we need to do, Phyllis and I, we've talked, we don't have time to take on this full-time project. We have a lot of system changes that we're doing to be able, because in that our reduction in force, we are losing someone in City Hall. We are just down staff. We don't have time to take this on full-time. And talking to the park director of the city of Rolla, he's very passionate about the project that they did, and he is more than willing to talk to anybody about what they did and how they came about. I have even more files from him in my folder that I can email out, but really this would just be for the discussion of the advisory committee to find out what direction you all would like to take, and do we need to form a citizen committee to help if that's what we want to do, if we want to move forward with something. I don't know what cooperation we could get with the University of Missouri. We could definitely reach out to them and see if they have any resources available. It's hard to do a project when you don't have any money, but
Well,
maybe there might be enough
I
community
think you have to have
support.
a goal as well, if you're gonna do a
Sure.
project, right? What is the goal and the end result you're trying to get to, right? So I would challenge you folks to talk amongst yourselves and figure out what is that, because just because there's, some folks have a perceived need, it doesn't mean it makes sense, it is sensible to do. And it has, and I mean, and I don't mean it in a way of selecting it, it has to do with race, is what I'm trying to say. It has to do with, what are you gonna get if we do this mapping? I guess we would find that there are people buried in unknown spots that we already know
We
that.
already know that, yeah.
So my point is, to what point do we, I mean, what do we gain from doing this radiography and all these things, if it's just gonna tell us what we already know and a little bit more precision? As you see the color coding that you'll see, it will send to you, Greg, it's a mapping, it's a college, it's part of an archaeologist, people who are going to archaeology, I'm sure did this, right? I'm not sure, this is gonna be a project that's gonna take some time to do that's on that sheet. That's not gonna be a one school year thing. It's gonna take time. My question is, to you, what I'll challenge you with, and we will support, this is absolutely true, we will support anything any of our committees or any, the library or the cemetery board or whatever wants to do that they think makes sense and has a plan to do. But I think you folks have to decide, what do you want the outcome to be? Is the outcome just because, I don't know if you do that, and that's all I'll say about it, and we will support, you folks going to the University of Missouri and see if they got somebody that wants to do that. This is might be a good time, when their resources and their money's short, they maybe not going to Israel to do an archaeology dig, they might come to Centralia, they may do, something local, I don't know, but, so just something to think about. We get caught up with emotion, and we want to try to fix everything, but sometimes there's some things that are, you can only fix to a point. They're fixed as far as they go. I don't know, but that's all I'll say. And that's not to try to get anybody to think of it my way. Not at all. Because I have been wrong many times before, and I'm willing to admit I have been. And then let's move on. Let's figure out. I've changed my mind many times by people showing me a different perspective and some collateral information that made sense to me. That why I was wrong, and I wouldn't look at the whole picture. So that's all I'll say.
And if we do find, if you do find that there's something that you guys want to move forward with, some sort of a plan, end result, the mayor can appoint an ad hoc committee just for this project. So it would be like a subcommittee of the cemetery advisory committee, if that's what you guys would like to do. So, you don't have to make a decision tonight. Obviously, we've given you a lot of information, you have a lot of stuff in front of you. I think
you probably should digest it, talk amongst yourself, email one another, ask for information. We'll
talk to the public,
talk to the public, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I don't know, I wish it was in perfect condition out there, you know? And if we could have that as an end result, I would say, my gosh, yeah, if it takes us 10 years to get that project done, we should do it.
And after talking to Phyllis, she mentioned that there are unidentified graves in lots 1, 2, and 4 as well. So do we wanna just focus on block 3 because that's what was brought to our attention? Or if we're gonna go in, do we wanna go all in and go with blocks 1, 2, and 4 as well? So those are just the oldest parts of the
That's-
cemetery.
Yeah.
Those 4, right? Mhm. Right. Do we have anybody that's unidentified since we took it over in the 60s? I like to guess we would not at all.
There would at least be a record of the sale and the burial. And Phyllis has even gone steps further, and she's now keeping copies of all warranty deeds, which that wasn't done until Phyllis took over in 12,
Something like that.
11 or 12.
Right.
Probably
It's a
took
good
11.
idea to do that,
Yeah.
if somebody loses a warranty deed, you've got one, at least a copy of it for the family.
Right.
And the last thing they wanna be doing is running around trying to find the dang deed when they're trying to,
And that's
You
what
don't
we
know
find
somebody,
happens
right?
a lot. That's why we contacted Vicki, because she was able to see if maybe they had some information, because we were told maybe the church had some information. So, thoughts? Questions?
I think every grave ought to have a marker. I think if we sell a grave site, within a year, there has to be a marker put there. You know,
Most of
or
the time
when,
there is.
or after they pass, you know, some kind of a marker.
Usually when, the funeral home, puts up their little metal markers.
They don't last.
They don't last long either, no, because of the mowing and the weed eating, but, sometimes it's difficult for people to even buy the grave space, money-wise. So,
Well, maybe just a aluminum marker we can buy with, just something that shows that somebody's buried there. So we can drive it around a couple of feet,
we could,
the water's not gonna.
with
wash
a
away.
tag or something
Well,
on it.
something about maybe that wide, about that.
That maybe has a-
tall, couple
maybe
feet
has a-
drove in the ground.
I know at one time, when they buried them out there, they did have markers, because Metters always had markers, because most of the,
yeah,
since
that's,
I was around, they had their funerals at Metters.
Right, sure.
yeah.
And he had a marker, but as the years go by, nobody puts any headstones out, so the markers are gone. Because I remember when I used to go out there as a kid, there was markers out there.
I've even,
But they're not there anymore because of, obviously, it's
Well,
been.
is that, that could be something that we could look at for the cemetery advisory committee too, to suggest maybe purchasing 1 marker a year, maybe 2 markers a year, 2 headstones a year.
Maybe you get, some folks to donate, get a fund going, and that's earmarked for those folks that, and it's as simple as you get a granite plaque almost type thing that you put in the place. It's not gonna go away, that has the name and date or whatever, and it's marked at least that way, you know what I'm saying? I don't know, I'm just throwing some thoughts out, but,
I even have dug around in the dirt out there, literally with my fingers, and brought up the old markers that used to be at Metters where they had the little letters.
Mhm.
And I had found all the little letters in a couple
Used to
of
be-
markers.
used to all-
I remember
Yeah.
very well, yeah.
Yeah.
Are you talking about the little aluminum ones?
Yeah.
Yeah, the little, and
Yeah.
it had little individual letters,
Mhm.
like
And
you
you
could
can
put
put
them
them,
on
you
the
can put them
sign.
on there, you want to
Yeah, I
sign.
think they still do that, don't they?
Well, but they're a square window with something printed
Oh.
there. But this was
Oh.
actually a little bitty
Yeah.
tiny square for each letter.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
But like I
That's
said,
what they got on
longboards
my
get
mom's
in,
grave.
they get, the letters get knocked off.
Mhm.
Yeah.
That's right.
That's
They
why
do.
I'm something tall that the Moors can see at least.
Yeah, absolutely, there might be something that, that's
something-
economical, but would serve the purpose.
But we don't wanna have people say, oh, well, I'm not gonna put up a marker because the city's gonna
Yeah.
provide you one. We don't
Right.
want that either.
That's
So-
what'll
That's
happen.
what'll happen.
Well,
Yeah.
I'm talking mainly in
Yeah.
the ones that new ones we're gonna find where people's buried in this section.
That's,
That way, there's
Yeah.
a marker there and
Mhm.
we don't run into
maybe we could
a lot of problems.
have somebody call some of the other cities and see what they do. If they do something like that to mark an unknown grave or
we could set up some sort of a donation fund for the I know we do donations at, Memorial Day, so maybe, the committee could suggest, say, we want half of that donation money to go towards these markers, and we can earmark it for that every year.
And somebody would have to fill out a form of some sort to justify the need. I don't mean bad, but I mean, otherwise, people say, well, I've got that fund I can go to, and we can't.
Or if it's
subsidize
been
your-
5 years or so since they've been buried and nothing's been done, then, maybe we could set a time frame. But I think those are all definitely good parameters to just discuss.
Right.
A lot of options there.
Now, there's some headstones in this section 3 that are in the wrong place, Vicki.
Mm-hmm.
We need to get that addressed and get them in the right spot.
I don't know how to tell you how to do it. I just know they're not in the right spot. I can't tell you exactly where it's supposed to start, but I guess you guys can figure that out. But I know, they're not right. But I don't know, just by looking at it, I can't tell you if they're too far over or too far. I just know from when I was growing up to where they are now, it's not right.
We could,
Because they were never in a straight line. It was, some were up further toward the highway, or the road, some were a little bit backwards. That was way back when they didn't make everything straight.
No, it wasn't straight, it's
Like they
symmetrical.
do now.
Now that,
Just road.
those 3-4 rows angled, they're not parallel
Right.
to the street.
Right.
Mhm,
Yeah, that's,
Yep.
mhm. 12 in this one over here, you mean?
Yeah.
Right.
Mhm. So what happened to so is there a way for, is there any paperwork left from when they marked that supposedly when?
I haven't come across it, but I haven't looked through all of the,
Unless they were just counting on Ernie to.
You see, I think that's what they were. He was the one that was pretty much in charge of the removal and putting back. So I think he was the only one who actually had the paper.
Had the game plan, had the document that would.
and he doesn't have that anymore. That's no longer around.
Not that I know of.
Do what? That document we've never seen, have we, here?
I've never seen it.
the
but
what?
The document that Ernie would have had.
I've never
No,
seen
I
it.
think he just went out with a piece of paper and said, okay, Clarissa was supposed to be right here, and, he had it marked, and where she was supposed to be. I never saw it either. I
He
just know.
was good, as good as he could, is what it was.
Right, but he just wasn't
Right.
there when the gentleman put him back. That's why it's not right.
I think the only thing that we could do at this point is we could go off of our GIS map. We could go off of the records that we have, which we believe are correct. And we could measure
In real line.
and realign. But they probably will all be in a straight line though.
Yeah, that's, but if they're over the right grade, they're probably.
Right, it probably be
Yeah, that
better.
would be all right. I mean,
Yeah.
that's, I
The
think,
person would still
sinker's
be on
saying,
it.
right? I mean,
Yeah.
Hmm.
There's one way you can
Person
find
would
out,
still be
when it's
recognized.
real dry,
mhm,
you can tell where a grave is out there, because the grass is
Yeah.
real brown over the grave.
mhm.
It is. But if there's nothing
Well, I'm
left,
gonna tell
This
you
year,
what,
I don't think.
that fella had those widgets, and when we
Which-
went out there, and he would walk along, and
Have you ever seen that?
he pointed down the deal,
They're
and that
just-
thing would cross, he would walk,
Yeah.
and it would cross, and he walked over past John's spot, Kelly, and she's not passed away, Darcy, so there shouldn't be anybody there, and that thing was right on money, man, and it opened up, and it closed
All it
again.
is just two
Two
metal
metal rods,
L-shaped rods.
they find water, how they find
Mhm,
water.
Yeah, those
Yeah,
kind
no,
of,
that's what I call them.
Yeah.
We call them something else, but yeah.
But, and he walked down there before when he'd been doing it, he goes, we got people buried all the way down through here. There's
He
no
said he's never
headstones.
been wrong.
He said, I've never been wrong. And then he said, these are, I'm telling you, man, this is pretty close to, I know you may think it's crazy, but he said, they're pretty much on the money. I done do it everywhere. Has something to do with in the ground where the body had taken space. There's an emptiness or whatever it affects the electrical. See what I'm saying? That's why he says, he was explaining to me, it was over my head. They were too wired.
So there are spaces out there where they are, where they buried the Kelways, there are extra spaces? or
No,
not?
no.
No, there weren't.
There
That's what
weren't,
There
okay.
weren't.
No,
No,
they
he
were-
walked along, said, no, somebody here. So we were trying
But
to
there's
figure out,
no, but there was no
no
headstone.
headstones.
No, that don't surprise me.
There was no headstones, and so, I mean, that's why we were trying to figure out, he was kind of long around saying, because when I talked to Mr. Kelly, I said, look, we're gonna try to work with you and do something we haven't done long, ever, since 2001, but you're gonna have to have a 1, 2, and 3. I know what your one's gonna be, is to be by the brother and the family there. We gotta have an option 2, and we need an option 3, just in case that morning that we find somebody. And that's what we were doing, but he was already kind of pre-walking around, see, well, and so the 3 we picked, he said there wasn't anybody there with that widget thing, these witching rods or whatever you call it, you know? And he was right about the one, you know, right next to the sibling, so,
And why was he sure that the sibling was there? Was that marked?
all across.
Yeah.
Because it crossed.
It crossed.
And we were walking across.
It
and
crossed
we were
where he
looking
has
at-
to-
But
and
it
it-
crossed where he thought it was.
Oh, yeah.
Yes,
I
and it
was
is
really
marked,
sure.
the sibling is
Right,
marked.
right
There's a
over,
headstone there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
but
So that headstone was right?
Yeah, that headstone.
That headstone was right,
It
yeah.
had a headstone.
It had a headstone.
But then he walked down towards the short end of the street there, heading south, basically, this way, and there's 7 bodies buried here.
I believe it.
And I'm like, okay, wow.
Did you keep track of all that, those numbers?
No.
What's he charge?
I don't know, man, he would help us, I'm sure he would, I mean, we didn't pay him, but, and he could tell you where people are at, I mean, that's something he could do, I think, to a point.
Get him to walk through there and put some stakes down and say, well, you know, at least we know where a body is.
Knowing how many people would be a start for
Sounds quite a few.
somebody to say we're acknowledging it.
Yeah, he said so. And I
No.
was telling her, I said, no wonder we quit selling over here in 2000, you know? To me, I think that's a good thing, because,
Right.
good Lord, what worse thing to happen than to go to
Well, yeah.
having a burial.
Because my mom said there's a lot of people, she said they were buried there that just didn't have a headstone. She knew they were buried there, she didn't know exactly where.
Well, this guy was talking about, he took people with it themselves, take somebody out there, dig a hole and bury, I mean, dig them a
Maybe
grave site,
back
you know, the
before,
whole
yeah.
sounds bad, but burial.
Back before they were, you know,
And
monitoring it.
not even registered, you know?
You said pre-Civil War, I mean, the whole thing's Civil War.
Sure.
If it started with.
Yeah.
Well, that's what it goes back to, I mean, so it's really old.
So I guess we just wanna, you know, give this information to you, let you mull over it, think about what direction the cemetery advisory committee would like to take. And then we can present some sort of a plan to the Board of Aldermen. Whether it be, we wanna pursue this and find if there are grant opportunities that might help us locate these things. And then it'll just take some research and possibly even a citizen committee if that's the route you guys wanna go. I think you probably have some really good resources in the community. We actually know somebody that is interested in writing grants, just for fun. Doesn't that sound crazy? Grant writing's not fun. Unless you know how to do it, so.
You know, on this list that's on here of the letter, right? You know, paying for ground penetrating radar to definitely determine the location of a person's buried, I mean, that's available, but it's expensive, right?
And it doesn't even determine if it's, sometimes it's just a disturbance in the ground, and it would
Right.
say, maybe this is a possible stone, maybe
So
this
we
is a
have that,
possible.
right, I'm just kinda wanting to
Disturbance.
read through this of what makes
Yeah.
sense to us right now, right off the bat. Conducting a public community push for families to identify their families, ancestors, and been buried if they have the records. You've spoken to that, I think, already,
Yeah,
Vicki,
there's.
right? I mean, and I think we tried to capture that when we went with the GIS.
I really do believe that Kathy already has taken, she already did that step.
So I
It's
think
on
that
the
step
line.
is done. Now, raising funds for main marker knowledge and equities that took place, honoring all those who are buried there. You know, I think that maybe that's something we should consider too. You might want to think about considering, should we have a marker for all those unknown, souls that are buried here, you know, or something, you know, a plaque, you know, or, you know, I don't know. Just something to think about, raising funds for individual markers, so the graves can be more permanently marked, and that, you brought that up. Actually talked about that a little bit, how can we mark when we find, if we can identify there's someone there. And all the above will allow families to purchase actual open lots to lay their little well. No, we're not gonna, I can tell you that one, we're not gonna go back down that slippery slope, because if we miss one,
Right, that'd be
the next
one.
thing you know, you have a lawsuit because somebody's in the middle of trying to bury somebody and sold, real estate that's not available.
Right.
So to speak, right? So I mean, I don't think that's an option for us. There's a reason we closed that section of the cemetery. It was the right thing to do, without question to me, because if you can't be sure, you shouldn't do it,
Right.
right? And, so, just wanna touch on those, things, and we've talked about all those, so, good.
Can I say a couple of things, Mayor?
Sure, go right ahead.
Well, I think, first of all, I think a couple of inroads could probably be made if we talk to the university. I think we at least ought to inquire with the university.
Okay.
And another place to go might be to the Historical Society of Missouri. Their headquarters, of course, is down in Columbia now. And they might have records that we might not be aware of. So that might be another place to make some inquiries. And as far as, ground penetrating radar isn't as expensive as it used to be, and if it's done in conjunction with an educational institution, it could be something that we might not even have to pay for, or
Right.
at minimal cost, I think. I like the idea of getting out, putting out some inquiries and having families give us as much as they can, because that I think is helpful. And then, I think marking every single one is just going to be a possibility, and burying in that section, I think you're right on that part too. We just can't take those chances. But I do like the idea of a single marker, so that we can get evidence that people, just a large enough marker that we can put the names of people that families can confirm are buried there, and that we can confirm from other records. That's a nice compromise as far as I see it. That's, again, that's my opinion on it. Just something to think about. Churches also, some of the local churches might have some information. I don't know. How about newspaper records? How far do we go back? Are they available? Or can maybe get obituaries?
We could ask James.
That might be another place to just try. I'm tossing out ideas here as much as anything.
No, I think you're throwing out, realistic thoughts. Or anything crazy. So I think you're all tracking the right way about how you need to kinda, as a group,
I guess, is there anyone that's volunteered, does anybody have connections at the University of Missouri that might be able to reach out to somebody to see, somebody that would contact the guard to ask about those obituaries, those kind of things, then somebody to talk to the Missouri Historical Society, so, finding volunteers to do that is a good idea.
I didn't know you could do a somersault like that, Greg, it was pretty good.
I'm a lot more spry than you think.
No, I just seen it, man, it's unbelievable. So, does anybody wanna take on, I'm not trying to take over, this is your meeting, though. Does anybody wanna try to reach out to the university, of the group, and try to see who you talk to and who might be, in those departments to talk to?
Or would you like to think about the idea of getting a bigger citizen committee together? More minds and more resources might be valuable in this situation, because this is not an easy task. So,
We
just
might
the-
find somebody that's truly
in
wanting
the
to get
university.
involved in it.
Yeah, so, put out the feelers for that. If that's the route you wanna go, we can see if we can, our Facebook posts on asking people to volunteer for committees are not that great, but we could do something, and this, as the city of Centralia saying, we're looking to appoint an ad hoc committee for the cemetery, of the cemetery advisory committee.
I think you need to hit churches on that one.
Yeah, I think that would be good.
Letters out to churches to see if anybody, because they might be more receptive to helping the
Yeah.
cemetery
That makes
more
sense.
so.
So maybe we'll do that first instead of posting it on social media or immediately. Send out a notice to see if, and it maybe Phyllis, you have a contact with Ministerial Alliance, right? So we can send out a quick email and then, we'll send you guys another message about convening with our ad hoc committee. So the next Board of Aldermen meeting that committee could be appointed is September 21st, so we'd be looking at sometime in September to continue on the conversation, if that works for you all. Unless you wanna do something sooner.
This will take 30 days to come up with 5 or 6 people.
I
I
think
mean,
you
if they're
will.
truly,
I really
Am I-
do.
you're gonna want somebody passionate, I mean, you know. I think anybody, if they volunteer or raise their hand, are gonna be
Right.
very interested in it,
I
right?
think so.
Right.
But that's where we're gonna get the best work, probably.
I agree.
Chris, years ago, I know my grandmother told me this, you know, we used to have a jail back over here,
Mhm.
and there's a guy that died in jail. And I thought they buried him here along Southgate, right here in some of these unknowns, right close to the road. But I never remember a marker, well, it says unknown, but I don't remember his name. Might as well find you a police station back there, he died in jail.
Right. See, that doesn't surprise me either,
I
I
was
mean,
only like 8, 9. I
right,
remember going down that road to Nell Sneed's house, my grandmother said the guy they buried right there,
was from jail too.
yeah, he died in jail. Who he
Yeah.
was, I don't know.
Right. I'm sure that's true, I mean, sure that's true. So, yeah, we could ask them about,
My understanding is that I am not gonna be able to help a lot on this project, but you can come to me and Heather and the mayor and for information but we're in the process of learning new software packages here, and so we need someone that would kind of like to head up this or be the chairman. Anyone interested in maybe wanting to take on being the chairman of this?
You don't have to answer tonight, you can think about it, you can sleep
Yeah.
on it. When we reconvene in September,
Yeah.
you can all just raise your hands and then we'll have to vote on it.
yeah, I'm sure we'll have to fight over it, but it'll be okay.
Okay. Has anybody got any questions or comments or?
One more suggestion, if you don't mind.
Sure.
If there is a Civil War element to this, somebody might touch base with Jack Chance.
I agree.
Right. Well, somebody was talking about getting a hold of, the veterans, you know, they got the thing up in Phillipsburg or whatever, the people that run that. Too, they have a lot of history about, I think, that too as well.
Where's this at?
Well, where the veterans,
Oh, Jacksonville?
yeah, Jacksonville, yes. Somebody mentioned that as well.
You know, someone's got something on Facebook going too about Centralia history. I never paid any attention to who really started it but they're putting a lot of different things on history. I don't know if
Right,
there would be interest there or not.
right.
A lot of records and things they're pulling up.
She took notes, Greg. She's taking notes over here. You can't see that, but of everything being said and suggested, okay?
That's fine. I think a lot of records are held over Jefferson Barracks in St. Louis too. I'll be willing to give, the Historical Society of Missouri a call, see if they can direct us anywhere.
Good. Okay, that'd be nice. Could you reach out to the university too as well and see if, you know, if you can get a lead on, you know, field projects, that kind of thing that they may do?
Yeah, I'm figuring I may get some of that when I go to the Historical Society.
Right. Okay.
Have
Sure.
to do that.
Thank you, sir.
Sure.
Locally here, who does the Centralia Historical Society and
Marjorie
the
Motley,
guard?
we picked her brain, but she is such a wealth of knowledge.
Yeah, she's showing.
But definitely worth sitting down and talking to Marjorie. She's the one that was helping us that day when we were looking for records.
We want to try to be at least 75% sure that of what was available, you know, that morning to make sure we were able to take care of it, so.
What are we gonna do about leveling stones? You know, we got, like, I told Phyllis, we got one great big one that fell over.
I got Scott Whalen's coming to do a couple, three that's already partially paid for. And he's also got some of those other stones on a list, so we're supposed to talk to him about it. So,
Can I ask you a quick question, because I have no knowledge? How is the cemetery funded? How is the funds at this point, the balance ledger, that kind of thing? Is it healthy? I mean, what?
I honestly don't know.
The cemetery is funded, the maintenance of the cemetery is funded every year by a transfer from the electric department.
Right.
Kind of a pilot and.
That's for the mowing and all that, right?
For the mowing and all that.
Mhm.
And, then we did receive a sizable donation, for maintenance that could be maybe used for some of these monuments. If that's what we end up deciding to do, or a big monument, which I think
Okay.
is probably a better option. But that's just my opinion, and you guys can decide however you would like. So we have that money there, but it's not,
Okay, so there's some funding
there's a little bit
that's
of money.
available a little bit. And as far as that, I think we ought to, I would check with the local church groups, youth groups, the Boy Scouts, that are looking for merit badges, things to do. I'm sure that we can find some people that need to do some, public service to work off, you know, something that they didn't do right, or couldn't pay a fine or whatever. So I think what you need to do is try to work towards a couple of, maybe work days at some point, because we know that we can use the insurance at this point, right? I mean, that's what was vetted. So when you guys just gotta kind of decide and kind of try to get, we need to get the word out to figure out, get the personnel, get help, get help, like a work day. I would schedule a couple of work days out there and see what you can get done.
I would
Of leveling
suggest
them up.
you, I'd suggest you go section by section. That way you know you haven't missed something. So I would start at the south end and work yourself up, because that's the oldest and,
Most in need.
yeah. So, but,
No,
I need to go.
no.
That's okay.
Yeah, you're fine.
Sorry.
And I got another thing out there. We got, in the older parts, they've got like concrete square things around the graves.
coving or,
If you-
Kinda like
we
curbing.
need them, that's hard for the mowers to work around.
yeah, but that's that family's property.
Pull this back and we'll
So,
talk.
It's like a boundary of a.
Thank you all.
yeah, and that's what the families did back in the days. They made this curbing, I call it curbing, around there, and that's, so, but I agree, it is very hard for the mowers.
I got looking at me and Donnie looked at it and said, good Lord, that makes it twice as
Yes.
bad, the weed eating and mowing. You can't mow them, you gotta weed eat the whole section.
Right.
Look like the deer. Have a little
You do.
wisdom where you get up there, can't be a very big one,
I was
so.
16, I had these things out there
Oh, yeah,
going around stones.
yeah.
Yeah,
So-
and that's another reason why we don't allow footstones anymore in the newer sections.
I will say this, make this comment. Earlier in the year, we had some challenges with weather and some labor, and who we contracted that was doing that out there for us, the mowing and weed eating and all that. I think they've done a really, really good job of getting it together and doing a pretty good job with the cemetery since then. It's a huge job, and when you bid that, I mean, there's 75% of it's manual labor weeding. It is a mowing on a mower. You know, so he did a really good job of responding and understanding there's a need and a concern, and we were getting some complaints early on. And just wanted to say to you guys that I thought he did a really good job of responding and trying to make that right. You know,
The only complaint I heard about his mowing was, not getting all the stones and grass blowed off from around him.
Right.
Which I know them miss some now.
Well, see, part of the problem was if you mow when it's wet, you don't want that, you're shooting that stuff all over the stones and then it sticks to them and then the blower don't get it all off. And so you're kinda danged if you do, danged if you don't. You're trying to mow and you don't wanna leave ruts. And then on top of that, you gotta mow or it'll get you have to bail it. So he had a little of that, but he was having a little labor trouble at first. I think he got that straightened out. And, just, you know, yeah, you're right. And but I wanted to say, publicly, I thought he did a really good job of recovering from some issues that we had early on, and has done a pretty good job of being responsive to Phyllis, would you say
Yes,
that's right?
absolutely,
Yeah.
yeah,
You know, I
absolutely.
mean, if I called somebody's attention that this isn't getting it, I also want to go back and also say, you know what? They did a really good job of fixing that, correcting that, and doing a good job for us, right?
Right.
So, we want people to want to bid to do that, and we want people to continue to do it because, it'd be quite a job.
When I worked out there, the city did it. We had a little building out there and
Mhm.
the last section just opened up, right there on the corner. We had our lawnmowers and,
Well,
Lee Bryson dug grades. He was chief of police.
right. Well, we've got some things we're kicking around too, so stay tuned. There may be, we'll see. I mean, we're looking at other services we've farmed out and third-partied out, such as the trash collection, those kind of things. Does it make sense, for us to take it back in-house or not, you know? And then we have control over people be frustrated about what time it's being picked up, those kind of things. And I'm not sure that, we need to do a study to understand whether what we're doing is the right thing to do still today, or should we have a truck and a backup truck and should be doing it ourselves with a couple of employees and then the other departments help out when one of those people take vacation, because there's such a thing as a low person on a totem pole, and that's what you do. In your job classification, if you gotta ride the truck, one day you do it, you know, so we're doing some checking into that, and so there may be some capacity, is my point, for us to have a couple of days a week of work with a couple of people in a cemetery potentially in the future. So when you talk about we used to do it, that may be a carryover in the overall cost effectiveness of what we're trying to do. We're looking at everything, so.
Also in September, Randy Galloway will be doing some lawn spraying out there for weed killing. We've been doing that every other year. So that is a budgeted item, so that will, and that's the same price it was 2 years ago. I think it's $1,200, so.
But I'd like to thank all of you for your time, your effort, and being concerned and being on this committee, so thank you for it. I really mean that. It takes time, and it's something that's gotta be done, and it takes people to help us do these things, so thank you all for what you do.
Yes, thank you, I appreciate it too. Okay, anything else? Thank you for coming, appreciate it.
I think we're gonna adjourn. Mr. Pauly, I'm gonna disconnect you.
Thanks, Mayor.
All right, brother. See you later. Have a good night.
Thank you.